The phone kept buzzing on the granite counter, sliding an inch every time a notification hit. I didn't pick it up until I had the draft open on my laptop. James liked shared Google Docs. He thought they were faster than emailing versions back and forth. I read the third paragraph twice. He wrote that our mother had been surrounded by the love of her children in her final years. Then he spent the rest of the section on her early years as a civic leader and the stewardship of the family's ancestral home. He didn't mention the 3 years I spent driving her to dialysis in the middle of the night, or the way I'd had to reorganize her medication because she started doubling her doses. I was a footnote in the surrounded by love part, but the house James talked about like he already held the deed, got its own descriptive adjective. Then the text came through. James, funeral home needs the deposit for the premium vault and the chapel rental by Friday. If you and Danny can cover the first $1,200, I'll handle the flowers and the program. Danny, I called out, not looking away from the screen. Did you tell James we were paying for the vault? Danny came into the kitchen, wiping his hands on a rag. He'd been in the garage. He mentioned it on Tuesday. I told him we could probably make it work if we shifted the savings for the new tires. You told him we could make it work before you asked me? He seemed stressed. Mary, he's coordinating the whole thing. He's got the transportation for the aunts and the catering. He's coordinating the part he likes, I said. I looked back at the draft. Stewardship was still there, staring at me. I felt that familiar heat in my chest, the kind that usually made me just nod and do the work so everyone would stop complaining. But the gap between the writing and the bill was too much. I typed a response into the group chat, hitting the keys harder than necessary. I'm not paying for the vault. In fact, I think it's better if James handles all the setups and the costs from here on out. I'm stepping back from the planning entirely. Danny leaned over my shoulder, his face twisting. Wait, who's going to handle the clothing? Who's going to call the hospice about the release? James can, I said. He's the steward. Mary, don't be like that. He's just trying to get it right. He got the house right, I said. He forgot the rest. I snapped the laptop lid shut. I stood there in the kitchen, wondering if I had been too sharp, but I didn't take it back. Then the phone buzzed again. It was James, asking if I'd seen the updated font choice for the programs. I remember the way Danny looked at me, that sort of worried, squinting look he gets when he thinks I'm being difficult instead of just tired. He didn't go back to the garage. He stayed in the kitchen, leaning against the counter, shifting his weight from side to side. You can't just drop a bomb like that in the group chat and then close the laptop, he said. His voice was low, the one he used when he was trying to manage me. James is already on edge. He's got the transportation for the aunts sorted, and he's the one dealing with chapel. If you pull out now, the whole thing it stops. It doesn't stop, I said, though I was already starting to feel the familiar itch of responsibility. It just moves. He can call the hospice. He can pick out the dress. He's the one who cares so much about the stewardship of the house. I'm sure he can steward a phone call to the funeral director. Danny sighed, a long, heavy sound. Mary, please, for the sake of peace, we're already in the middle of it. Why make it a thing right now? He's in his head about the house. You know how he gets when he thinks he's preserving something. He doesn't mean to leave you out. He just forgets that the details aren't the same as the big picture. The details are the only part I did, I said. I know you did. But look, James has always been like this. He's just trying to get it right. And besides, Remember when he helped us with the deposit on this place? He didn't ask for a ledger. He just did it. I looked at him, and for a second, I wanted to remind him that the help James had provided years ago had come with a decade of reminders and a feeling that we were permanently in his debt. Danny remembered it as a gift. I remembered it as a loan with an invisible, compounding interest rate. But arguing about a 10-year-old check felt exhausting. He didn't help with the dialysis trips, I said. No, but he's handling the ants. That's a nightmare, Mary. You know how Aunt Sarah is about the seating. If you go back in, just tell him you'll handle the clothing and the hospice release, and he can handle the money. We don't have to pay for the premium vault. Just tell him we can't afford the upgrade. I stood there, looking at the closed laptop. The peace Danny was talking about wasn't actually peace. It was just the absence of a conflict that I was expected to resolve. If I stayed out, James would likely forget to call the hospice until the last possible second, or he'd buy a dress for Mom that was 3 sizes too big because he hadn't actually seen her in 6 months. He'd treat her body like another piece of the estate to be managed, a logistical hurdle on the way to the stewardship of the property. The thought of James handling the clothing made my stomach turn. He'd probably pick something stately and completely wrong. I'm not doing it, I said, but my voice lacked the snap it had a few minutes ago. Just a text, Danny urged. Just say you'll help with the personal stuff. It keeps the peace, and Mom gets what she needs. It's a win-win. I didn't answer. I walked out of the kitchen and went into the hallway, but I stopped at the door to the guest room. I could hear the phone buzzing again on the counter, a persistent, rhythmic vibration that sounded like a demand. I didn't go back in to check it. The next morning at the office, the air smelled of ozone and stale coffee. I spent 4 hours processing Snap applications, the kind of rhythmic, predictable work that usually centered me. I liked the forms. The boxes stayed where they were put. But every 20 minutes, my phone vibrated against the desk, a small, insistent reminder that the world outside the county building was still shifting. I waited until my lunch break to check the messages. There were 3 from Aunt Sarah. Sarah, James said you're coordinating the shuttle for the ants. Do I need to be at the hotel by 9 or 10? Sarah, Mary, I want to make sure I don't miss the viewing. James said you had the final schedule. Sarah, I'll call James again, but he sounded so rushed. I stared at the screen. I had told the group chat I was stepping back from the planning entirely. I had set a hard line. But James hadn't actually heard the line. He had processed the fact that I was no longer volunteering for the parts he didn't want to do. And in his mind, that meant he could still delegate the parts he found tedious. He had outsourced the expectation of my help without my agreement. The collateral cost was Aunt Sarah, who was now hovering in a state of anxious uncertainty because James was too preoccupied with the stewardship of the chapel and the vault to tell her what time to wake up. My thumb hovered over the keyboard to respond. Then I stopped. If I answered her, the boundary vanished. If I fixed the shuttle, I was back in. I put the phone face down on the break room table and ate my sandwich in a silence that felt like I was holding my breath. When I got home, Danny was already in the kitchen. He wasn't leaning against the counter this time. He was sitting at the table with a folder open and a pen in his hand, looking satisfied, almost smug, in a quiet way. I called the hospice, he said. The release is signed. I verified the insurance details and sent over a copy of the ID. They're sending the paperwork over to the funeral home now. I stopped in the doorway. You did that? Yeah, a few phone calls. The lady on the line, Brenda, needed the policy number and a confirmation of the primary contact. It took 10 minutes. A strange, prickly sensation rose in my chest. I had spent 3 days worrying about the hospice release, imagining a bureaucratic nightmare of signatures and delays that would leave Mom in a holding pattern. I had assumed it was a complex task that required my specific brand of oversight. But Danny had simply called. He hadn't overthought it, looked for hidden meanings, or waited for a committee meeting. He had solved the nearest problem. Thanks, I said, though it felt like a defeat. See, it's not a disaster, Danny said, closing the folder. James is still a bit scattered, but the big things are moving. He called me earlier to ask if you'd talked to Sarah about the shuttle. I told him you were still feeling overwhelmed and that he should probably send her the itinerary. Himself, I looked at Danny. He had already made the call the hospice release competently, but he had also reinforced the idea that I was overwhelmed rather than done. He was protecting the peace by framing my boundary as a breakdown. I'm not overwhelmed, Danny. I'm simply not doing it. Right, he said, standing up to put the folder away. Anyway, I'm going to start the grill. Do we have those burgers you like, or did we run out? I stayed silent and walked into the living room to pick up my phone. There was a new message in the group chat from James. James, reminder that we need to finalize the obituary by tomorrow morning. Mary, can you double-check the dates on the Civic Awards section? I want to make sure the timeline is perfect. I drove over to Mom's house on Thursday afternoon. I told myself I was just going to check the mail and see if any more of her things needed to be sorted. But I knew I was really going there to see if James had actually tried to call Aunt Sarah. James was already there, standing in the foyer with a clipboard. He had a way of occupying a room that made it feel like he was the only one who had ever lived there. He didn't look up when I came in. He was too busy adjusting the placement of a framed photo of our grandfather on the entryway table. The funeral director sent over the summary of services, James said, finally glancing at me. He didn't ask how my day was or if I'd eaten. He just handed me a printed sheet of paper. I've already gone through and highlighted the parts that are settled. I think we're in a good place. I took the paper. It wasn't a bill, but a breakdown of the service package. James had divided the page into 2 columns with a heavy black marker. The left column was labeled Legacy Costs, the premium vault, the chapel rental, the limousine for the clergy. These were the high-ticket items, the ones that looked stately, as Danny would say. Under the legacy column, James had written, Estate James. The right column was labeled Administrative and Ancillary. It included the death certificates, the obituary publication fee, the reception catering, the floral arrangements for the foyer, and the clothing prep. Under this column, James had written, Mary! I stared at the list. The administrative column didn't just cost money. It was a list of 12 different phone calls, deadlines, and errands. He had essentially categorized the prestige of the funeral as his responsibility, to be paid for by the house later, and the tedious immediate labor and costs as mine. What is this? I asked. It's just a way to keep it clean, James said, stepping back to admire the photo of grandfather. I'm handling the big picture stuff, the things that affect the family's standing. I figured you'd prefer the administrative side, since you're so good with the forms and the scheduling. It just seemed easier. You decided I was the administrative lead for the funeral? I didn't decide anything, Mary. I just organized the needs. I thought we were on the same page about the division of labor. I told you in the group chat that I was stepping back, I said. I felt that hot, tight pressure returning, and this time it felt like it was pushing me toward a cliff. I didn't want to be the one to keep the peace anymore. I didn't want to be the good one who I already made the call the napkins, while I already made the call the legacy. We all get stressed, James said, his voice. We all get stressed, Mary. But we have to be practical. I've already told the funeral director that you're the point of contact for the ancillary billing and the catering coordination. I stared at him, the paper trembling in my hand. You told him I was the point of contact? After I specifically told you in the group chat that I was out? James sighed, a sound of genuine patience that made my skin crawl. I just told him you were handling the logistics. It's a natural fit. Besides, since I'm the one coordinating the property transfer and the long-term stewardship of the house, I can't be tied up with the florist's delivery window. It's about efficiency. The collision was sudden and cold. He wasn't just forgetting my boundaries. He was leveraging his self-appointed role as the house's protector to exempt himself from the grunt work. In his mind, the stewardship of the estate gave him the authority to delegate the tedious reality of death to me. I wasn't his sister in this moment. I was his unpaid administrative assistant. I let the paper flutter onto the entryway table, landing right next to the photo of grandfather. I didn't pick it up again. I just looked at James, who was still standing there with his clipboard, looking like he was managing a construction site rather than his mother's funeral. I'm not your assistant, James, I said. My voice was quieter than I wanted it to be, but it felt steadier. And I'm not the administrative lead. I'm your sister. James shifted his weight, his expression sliding into that look of mild concern he used when he thought I was being emotional. Mary, this isn't about roles. It's about the reality of the situation. I'm the one dealing with the property transfer and the historical records for the house. That takes a tremendous amount of time. I can't be the one calling the florist to ask if they have white lilies or coordinating the sandwich platters for the reception. Then don't do it, I said. Hire someone. Or just don't have a reception. That's not how it works, he said. The family expects a certain level of decorum. We have a reputation in Greenville. I'm trying to ensure that Mom is honored in a way that reflects her standing. At that moment, Danny walked into the foyer. He'd been in the kitchen with James earlier, probably talking about the big picture things that didn't involve phone calls to caterers. He saw the paper on the table and the look on my face, and he immediately stepped into the middle, his hands up in a placating gesture. Now, let's not get worked up, Danny said. James is just trying to organize. It's a lot for one person. He's organized me into a job I didn't apply for, I said. James looked at Danny. I just told Mary the breakdown. I figured since she's already handling the snap cases and the county paperwork, this would be second nature to her. I just need her to confirm she can cover the ancillary costs, the obituary fee and the catering deposit, and I'll handle the legacy side through the estate. I watched Danny. This was the part where he usually nodded, the part where he told me to just be a team player for the sake of the week. But Danny was an insurance claims specialist. He lived in the world of line items and deductibles. He leaned over and picked up the paper, squinting at the administrative and ancillary column. He stayed silent for a long time. I could see him doing the math in his head, comparing the legacy column, which James was paying for with future money he already felt he owned, against the administrative column, which was coming out of our current checking account. Wait, Danny said, his voice hesitant. James, you put the reception catering under Mary's side? Yes, James said. It's a service item. But the reception is for the whole family, Danny said. He didn't look at me. He was still focused on the list. I thought we were splitting the guest costs. If Mary's covering the food and the flowers and the obituary, that's a lot of out-of-pocket right now. It's a small fraction of the total cost, James, replied, his tone sharpening. The vault alone is thousands. I'm absorbing the heavy lifting. The heavy lifting is in the future, Danny said. He sounded confused, almost as if he were realizing the math didn't work for the first time. The catering is due Tuesday. We don't exactly have a surplus after the tire situation. James sighed, the sound of a man burdened by the lack of vision in others. I thought we had an understanding, Danny. I thought you agreed that the stewardship of the house was the priority. I do, Danny said, but he didn't move to put the paper back in my hand. He held it against his thigh, his thumb rubbing the edge of the page. I don't think it's fair to put the whole ancillary bill on Mary. That doesn't seem right. It wasn't a grand alliance. Danny wasn't suddenly championing my cause or calling James out for his arrogance. He was just hesitating because the piece had finally become too expensive for him to ignore. James looked from Danny to me, his face tightening into that expression of wounded nobility. I didn't realize we were counting pennies on the catering, Danny. I thought we were focused on the legacy. I'm the one who's going to be dealing with the lawyers and the title search for the next 6 months. That's a full-time job in itself. I'm not counting pennies, Danny said, though he was still staring at the list. It's just $1,200 for a vault is one thing, but the ancillary stuff adds up. I don't remember agreeing to a separate ledger for the administrative side. You didn't explicitly agree to a ledger, James said, his voice sliding back into that patient, instructional tone. But you did say on Tuesday that Mary was the one who really had a handle on the schedule. You said she was the engine of the family. I just took that as a sign that she wanted to oversee the logistics. I looked at Danny. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He was staring at the administrative column, his thumb still rubbing the paper. By then, I knew Danny had played the part of the bridge, as he always did, but he'd built it out of my time and my money. He'd told James I was the engine because it was a compliment that cost Danny nothing to give, but it had provided James with the justification he needed to outsource the grunt work. You told him I was the engine, I said. I just meant you're organized, Mary, Danny mumbled. I didn't think he'd make a list. He didn't make a list, I said. He made a job description. James stepped forward, his clipboard held like a shield. Look, we can tweak the numbers if it's a problem, but the catering deposit is due Tuesday. The florist needs a confirmation by tomorrow. If we start arguing about who pays for the sandwiches now, we're going to miss the window for the chapel. Do you really want that to happen? Do you want the service to be a mess because we couldn't agree on a few $100s? It was the same hook he always used, the threat of a mess. For years, I had been the one to step in and prevent the mess. I could already feel the impulse to just take the paper, call the caterer, and pay the deposit just to stop the tension from vibrating in the room. It would be easier. I would feel the temporary relief of having the situation under control, and Danny would stop looking so guilty. And James would go back to admiring the photo of grandfather. But I looked at the legacy costs column again. James was treating the future inheritance as a current credit line, a way to buy status and decorum while I was expected to pay for the actual reality of the death. The caterer can wait, I said. James blinked. What? I said the caterer can wait. If the window closes, it closes, Mary. Don't be ridiculous, James said. The family is coming from all over. We can't just not have food. Then you call them, I said. You're the steward. I'm sure you can find a way to make the catering reflect the family's standing. I felt a sharp, cold prickle of guilt. It felt mean, leaving the logistics hanging in the air like that. I could imagine Aunt Sarah's face if there were no sandwiches at the reception, the way she'd tell everyone for years that the funeral was underwhelming. But the thought of taking that list back into my hand felt like signing a contract for another 10 years of invisible labor. I can't do it, Mary, James said, his voice dropping an octave. I genuinely do not have the bandwidth. Between the property transfer and the transportation for the aunts, I'm at my limit, then hire a coordinator, I said. Use some of that legacy money. James looked at Danny, searching for a rescue. Danny looked at me, then back at James. He seemed torn between his desire to keep the peace and his sudden, uncomfortable awareness of the math. Maybe James can just handle the catering, Danny said tentatively. It's just one phone call. James stared at him, stunned that the bridge had finally buckled. He didn't argue, but he didn't agree either. He just stood there, the clipboard still in his hand, looking at the list on the table, as if it were a foreign object. I didn't wait for him to find a solution. I turned and walked back toward the car, leaving the summary of services lying face up on the entryway table, right next to the photo of our grandfather. I didn't talk to Danny on the drive home. I just watched the road and thought about the way the administrative column had looked, like a checklist for a job I'd been doing for years without a paycheck. When I walked through the front door, the house smelled like grilled burgers and charcoal, a normal Saturday smell that felt completely wrong given the vibrations still humming in my nerves. Danny was on the porch, leaning back in the Adirondack chair. He didn't look up when I came out. He was staring at his phone, his thumb scrolling slowly. James is losing it, Danny said, his voice flat. He just sent a flurry of texts to the group. He says the florist is threatening to cancel the order because the confirmation hasn't come through. He's talking about family disgrace and lack of support. He can call the florist, I said. I went to the grill and flipped a burger, the sizzle loud in the quiet afternoon. Mary? He's actually spiraling. He says he can't find the contact number for the shuttle company and that Aunt Sarah is calling him every 20 minutes. He's really stressed. He's the steward, Danny. Stewards handle the stress. I felt a flicker of something that felt like victory, but it was thin and cold. The victory was that James was finally feeling the weight of the things he'd categorized as administrative. The cost, however, was the atmosphere in my own house. Danny wasn't angry, but he was retreating into that silent, accommodating space he goes to when he thinks I'm being unreasonable. My phone buzzed on the side table. It was a call from Aunt Sarah. I let it ring 3 times before I answered. Hi, Sarah. Mary. Oh, thank goodness. I've been trying to get a straight answer from James about the hotel shuttle. He told me you had the final itinerary, but when I asked you yesterday, you didn't answer. Now he's telling me he's reviewing the logistics and he sounds like he's having a crisis. Do you know if the van is picking us up at 9 or 10? I looked at Danny. He was watching me, his expression a plea for me to just fix it, to be the engine, to make the noise stop. I don't have the itinerary, Sarah, I said. There was a long pause on the other end. What do you mean? James said you were coordinating the shuttle. He said you were the one with the schedule. James is coordinating the shuttle, I said. I tried to keep my voice level, but it sounded strained even to me. You'll have to ask him. I'm not handling the logistics anymore. Oh, Sarah said. Her voice sounded small, confused. I don't want to bother him if he's stressed. He sounded so overwhelmed. I just thought you'd know. He's the one in charge of it. Sarah, he'll have the answer. I see. Well, I'll try him again. I don't want to be late. You know how I get about the viewing, I know. Bye, Sarah. I hung up and put the phone face down. By then I knew Sarah wasn't just a relative. She was a piece of the machinery James used. He'd told her I was the contact so that he could maintain the image of the high-level coordinator while I did the actual coordinating. By refusing the role, I wasn't just hurting James. I was leaving the people who relied on me. People who didn't even know they were being manipulated in a state of anxiety. That was the repeatable harm. James didn't just steal my time. He used my reputation for competence as a shield to hide his own avoidance. He'd spent years making me the reliable one so that he could be the visionary one, and the only way to stop it was to let the vision fail. You didn't have to be so short with her, Danny said quietly. I wasn't short. I was factual. It just feels mean, Mary. She's old. She's just trying to get to the funeral. And James is the one who told her I was the one to ask, I said. If it feels mean, that's because the system he built is mean. I went back to the grill and scraped the charred bits off the burgers. My phone buzzed again. A message from James in the group chat. I can't find the shuttle number. Does anyone have it? I didn't answer. I walked inside and started setting the table. By Monday morning, the group chat had become a stream of James's escalating panic. He'd found the shuttle number, but now he was arguing with the florist about the shade of the lilies, and he'd sent a frantic message asking if anyone knew where Mom's good pearls were kept. I sat at my desk at the county office, staring at the screen. I had tried to step away entirely, but the silence felt like a different kind of work. Every time I saw a message from Aunt Sarah or a complaint from James, I felt the old pull to just fix it so the noise would stop. But I also remembered the administrative column on that piece of paper. I opened the shared Google Doc for the obituary. I didn't rewrite the whole thing. I just went to the third paragraph and deleted the phrase, surrounded by the love of her children. I replaced it with, she spent her final 3 years in the care of her daughter, Mary, who managed her medical needs and daily comfort at home. I didn't ask James if he liked it. I just hit save. When I got home, Danny was in the living room, looking exhausted. He'd spent the afternoon on the phone with James, trying to mediate the Lily crisis. He's really struggling, Mary, Danny said. He can't get the caterer to confirm the head count for Tuesday, and he thinks the funeral director is ignoring his emails about the vault. He's not struggling, I said. He's just doing the work. I know, but it's getting messy. Sarah called me twice. She's worried the whole thing is falling apart. I looked at Danny, and I realized that my first attempt at a boundary, stepping back from everything, had just created a vacuum that James tried to fill with more chaos. It hadn't stopped the harm. It had just shifted the stress onto Danny and the aunts. I'll handle the clothing and the jewelry, I said, and I'll make sure the photos for the slideshow are uploaded. That's it. I'm not touching the caterer, the florist, or the billing. Thank you, Danny breathed, leaning back into the sofa. Really? Just, thank you. I'm not doing the logistics, Danny. If the sandwiches don't show up, they don't show up. On Tuesday morning, I sent a short, formal email to the funeral director. I CC'd James. To the staff at Greenville Memorial, please be advised that James Davidson is the sole point of contact for all logistical arrangements, scheduling, and billing for the services. I will be coordinating only the personal effects and the obituary text. Please, direct all future invoices and confirmation requests to James. I closed my email and put the laptop away. An hour later, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. Hi, this is Brenda from the catering service. We haven't received the deposit or the final head count for the reception. If we don't have it by noon, we'll have to release the date. I didn't call Brenda. I didn't check the head count. I didn't even tell Danny. I simply forwarded the message to James and typed a one-sentence reply. James, Brenda is waiting for the deposit. I put the phone on the counter and went to the bedroom to find the pearls.